explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate tracker on WION World is One.
The US race to power, marked by high-octane campaign rallies, life-threatening encounters, game-changing presidential debates, the color and the drama, the key defining moments, deep insights and informed analysis. Watch continuous coverage of the US presidential elections 2024 on WION World is One.
Vielleicht nur als 5%.
Good morning, Asia. Good evening, America. You're watching World DNA with me, Raisha Segal.
And I'm Hem Kaur Saroya, and on the show today, we're looking at what's happening in West Asia. Egypt has proposed a 2-day Gaza ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, during which 4 hostages held in Gaza would be freed for some Palestinian prisoners. This proposal comes one day after Israel launched precision strikes on Iran. How high are the chances of a Gaza ceasefire deal this time around? That's something we'll discuss on the show today.
Also on World DNA, Georgia's president has said that she does not recognize the results of this weekend's parliamentary vote, which was won by pro-Russia ruling party. She further added that the country fell victim to a Russian special operation. We will be tracking that as well on the show today. Lots more lined up, but first, a quick check on the headlines.
Egypt proposes an initial 2-day truce in Gaza and limited hostage exchange aimed at securing a complete ceasefire. Later, this as UN Security Council to hold an emergency meeting at Iran's request following Israel's missile strikes.
One person killed and more than 30 injured as truck rams into crowd near Mossad spy agency's headquarters in Tel Aviv. Police say truck driver shot by armed civilians at the scene.
Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's coalition fails to secure a majority in the lower house of parliament, leaving no party with a clear mandate to lead the world's 4th largest economy.
Georgia's president urges people to protest the results of the country's disputed parliamentary election after ruling party's victory calls results a Russian special operation.
In Uruguay's presidential election, candidates of a left-wing bloc and the ruling centre-right coalition face off in the runoff next month after topping the first round of elections, as per projections based on partial results.
Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez arrives in India's Vadodara for talks with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Sanchez to inaugurate a final assembly line plant of C-295 aircraft.
China's large industrial firms see over a 27% decline in September, extending the decline in revenues as deflation takes toll. Reduced industrial earnings reflect the difficulties confronting China's $18 trillion economy.
Mohamed Salah scores a late equaliser for Liverpool as the Reds hold title rivals Arsenal to a 2-2 draw in the English Premier League. The stalemate puts the Reds 1 point behind leaders Manchester City. Our top focus on the show today. Egypt has now proposed an initial 2-day ceasefire in Gaza to exchange 4 Israeli hostages of Hamas militants for some Palestinian prisoners.
And this is negotiations to end the year-long war resumed in Qatar's capital on Sunday. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi made the announcement without saying whether the plan has been formally presented to either Israel or Hamas. Sisi said more negotiations will take place within 10 days.
Now, Egypt, alongside Qatar and the United States, has for months been mediating indirect talks with little success. CIA Director William Burns and Qatari Prime Minister met David Barnea, who is the head of Israel's spy agency, the Mossad, in a bid to discuss attempts to move towards a hostage for ceasefire deal.
This as families of the hostages continue building pressure on the Israeli government. On Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was heckled during a memorial service in Jerusalem for the October 7th attacks. Bereaved family members of the victims as well as the hostages interrupted his speech with shouts of "Shame on you."
Meanwhile, Israel continues to pound Gaza while also fighting a war against Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Gaza Civil Defense Agency said that Israel struck a school building sheltering displaced Palestinians on Sunday, killing at least 9 people. In total, at least 53 people were killed across Gaza in the last 24 hours, including 46 in the north of the Strip.
On the other hand, at least 21 people were killed in Israeli strikes on 3 different areas in southern Lebanon, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. This as global calls for restraint grow. The UN Security Council will meet on Monday at Iran's request, with Tehran calling on the body to condemn recent Israeli strikes that killed 4 of its soldiers. And for more on this, we're now being joined by Alan Burstein, live from Boston. He's a professor of political science and Israel Institute fellow at Tufts University. So thank you so much for joining us on WION.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. Now, sir, Egypt has proposed a 2-day Gaza ceasefire deal. This includes the exchange of Israeli hostages, of course, in return for some Palestinian prisoners. There's been no comment from Israel or Hamas yet. We know that ceasefire negotiations, they've been stalled for quite a while now. How do you assess the possibility of a ceasefire this time around?
So I'll say that just recently Al Arabiya, which is a Saudi news network, did quote some Hamas officials as saying if this deal would be proposed to them, they are going to reject it. So even though the Hamas is saying it hasn't been proposed, they're saying if it's proposed, it will be rejected. There's a lot of deals that are right now being floated. This is one of 3 deals that have been discussed. There's been discussed a 2-week deal. That was an Israeli proposal. Then Hamas has said that possibly they're going to propose an all-encompassing deal, a release of all hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, and a complete IDF withdrawal. All of this is just the initial attempts. Everyone's sort of throwing something out there to see, can negotiations start up? One more thing that I'll say, though, about why Egypt is proposing something that is very unlikely to be accepted. There's also somewhat of a competition right now between Egypt and Qatar over who is going to lead the negotiations. In Egypt, the head of the internal intelligence, Abbas Kamel, has been replaced by Hassan Rashad. He was not invited to the current negotiation rounds that are going on in Qatar. And as part of that, Egypt also proposed this new deal almost as an attempt to say we're still part of this, because no one really knows what's going to happen with the Hamas leadership after Sinwar's death. So the sides are trying to see who is going to be the more dominant figure in the region.
Right, Mr. Boostin, you speak of how Hamas officials are saying that they will outrightly reject the proposal. Some other reports also suggest that Hamas has said that it will accept the latest ceasefire deal as long as it incorporates its July 2nd demands, which of course includes an end to the hostilities in Gaza and withdrawal of all the Israeli troops from the Strip. Adding to that, Iran had earlier issued a statement saying that it might not respond to Israel's attack if a ceasefire deal is secured in Gaza. And Gallant has said that not all goals can be achieved militarily. So keeping all this in mind, do you think that the situation will perhaps move forward, and how much of an impact will Israel's precision strikes in Iran have on the ceasefire deal?
So unfortunately, when it comes to the negotiations between the sides, nothing has really come closer than where things were in May or in July. The main sticking points are still the fact that Hamas demands complete IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip and a removal of the siege of the Gaza Strip. Israel in turn has said it is not going to allow an end to the war. It is not going to withdraw from the Netzarim corridor, the Philadelphia access, and it is not going to accept Hamas rule in the Gaza Strip. Those things have not changed. Hamas is saying they'll accept the deal on the terms they had before. Israel has said it's not going to move on those terms. So unfortunately, all these new deals are different ways to try to jumpstart a new negotiations, but they're not bringing us any more forward as long as the sides are refusing to compromise on any of those things. With regards to Iran's role in the situation right now, it really depends if Iran decides to retaliate to Israel's retaliation in the ongoing situation. Right now, Iran initially indicated that it is likely to not retaliate, that it may be able to see the situation as complete. I think I spoke on your channel also about how Israel maybe carried out this attack in order to try to let this situation conclude itself between Israel and Iran. So if that happens, we're going to continue to see the escalations between Israel and Hezbollah, Israel and Hamas, and Iran continuing to fund the proxies, as has been for the past year. However, if Iran does retaliate, Israel will probably take it to the next level in its retaliation after that. That already has much more potential to destabilize the region.
Right, and just to expand on what my colleague asked you as well and what you said, of course we know the UNSC talks on Israel strikes on Iran, they are slated to take place today. Iranian envoy to the United Nations has said that Iran reserves its inherent right to respond to the Israeli strikes at a time of their own choosing. Now, do you reckon that how Iran responds, that's of course contingent on what happens going forward. It's also contingent on the results of this negotiation. How do you assess things will pan out going forward?
So one of the things that we always have to consider in this war with every single actor is the internal politics, right? Iran is fighting Israel. Israel's fighting Hezbollah. Israel's fighting Hamas. But as I said also with Egypt, what happens in the internal politics is really what determines the way things go. We've seen this with Israel, Netanyahu and his government. Similarly, in Iran, there are two different voices in the government. The president is a newly elected president. He would really like the situation to spiral down. He wants to focus on the economy. He's considered more of a moderate. The economy in Iran is very crippled with sanctions. He didn't want Iran to even retaliate now. However, he does not control the military. The military responds directly to the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and he in turn wants, or at least is claimed that he wanted to see more escalations and more retaliation. So really, Iran is going to continue to be an actor in the region no matter what when it comes to the war. But what will happen right now, it depends less on whether Israel manages to attack a certain target or not, and more who wins the internal political struggle within Iran's leadership.
Right, Mr. Boostin, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA. A lot of uncertainty moving forward regarding the ceasefire talks in Doha. But thank you for joining us on World DNA with your insights.
Thank you. Have a good day.
The Israeli city of Haifa has come under intense bombardment by Hezbollah in the last 1 month. There have been at least 20 airstrikes on the port city. Our next report tells you what makes Haifa an easy target for the Iran-backed group, and this as Israel intensifies its offensive in Lebanon.
Amid the raging Israeli ground and air offensive in Lebanon, the Iran-backed Hezbollah group is hitting back at one of Israel's biggest cities. Blaring sirens, plumes of smoke covering the sky have become a common sight in the Israeli port city of Haifa. The city with the busiest seaport and a metropolitan population of around 1 million. Haifa has been the primary target of Hezbollah's aerial attacks, especially after the killing of its chief Hassan Nasrallah last month. Part of this is due to the port city's vulnerability, located just 27 kilometers from the Lebanon border. The city presents an easy target for Hezbollah's missiles and as home to significant Israeli naval sites, several warships, energy installations, and a Shiite 7 unit. It promises many strategic gains for the militant group. Standing on the Mediterranean coast, Haifa serves as trade and commerce hub, connecting Europe, West Asia, and Asia. The port of Haifa also offers quick access to Israel's major cities and industrial hubs, facilitating the efficient transport of goods and resources. With its unmissable strategic significance, the Hezbollah is focusing on hitting energy and military installations. Back-to-back rocket salvos have jolted Haifa, causing massive damage and destruction. On October 8th, Hezbollah bombarded Haifa with over 100 rockets within an hour, which left several injured. The relentless bombardment has forced the Israeli military to review its sophisticated air defense systems like the Iron Dome, Arrow, and David Sling. The IDF has launched a probe to investigate why its air defense systems have failed to intercept a barrage of Hezbollah rockets.
The Iron Dome is not effective against a low-flying object like the Cornet or the Burkan rocket, which fly in a relatively low altitude. And also it's not effective against short-range objects, like the ATM, anti-tank missiles, the Cornet or the Burkan, because it takes time for the system to get ready and to operate, and it's too short time for the system to be ready.
Haifa has been threatened by the Houthis in Yemen as well. On June 23rd, Houthis carried out joint attacks against the city and several of its ships, but the attacks haven't been confirmed by Israel. The non-stop rocket attacks have triggered panic among the locals in Haifa, with many living in fear.
I really hope it will change the future for the area, and mostly I hope it will be a turning point for the hostages, and we will see them coming home as soon as possible, alive, and hope we will end this war and live in peace here.
Haifa is living precariously on the edge, desperately waiting for a ceasefire to end the destruction. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Right, Him, we're just 1 week away from the US presidential polls, and as the race to the White House nears, our colleague Jyotsna Kumar gets you the latest.
All right, we are just days away from the U.S. presidential elections as both Democrats and Republicans eye a strong finish to the campaign. Here are the top developments shaping this race. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump will make a final push to break their bitter deadlock as they head into the last week for the race for the White House in modern times. Now, despite a series of historic upheavals in an election like no other, polls show the Democratic Vice President and Republican former President remain neck and neck in the polls as Election Day on November 5th looms. Both will pull out all the stops to sway voters, with Harris giving her closing pitch on Tuesday at the same spot where Trump rallied supporters to protest his election 2020 loss before the deadly January 6, 2021 assault on the U.S. Capitol. Trump is also relying on spectacle with a barnstorming rally at the famed Madison Square Garden Arena in his home city of New York. Trump on Sunday added a new proposal to his list of tax cuts aimed at winning over older adults and blue-collar workers, a tax credit for family caregivers. Trump's promises already include vows to end taxes on Social Security benefits, tips, and overtime pay. Now, this comes after Harris has talked about the sandwich generation of adults caring for aging parents while raising their children at the same time. Now, Harris has proposed federal funding to cover home care costs for older Americans. The Washington Post has reported that Chinese state-affiliated hackers intercepted audio from the phone calls of U.S. political figures. This includes an unnamed campaign advisor of Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. The FBI and the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency said on Friday that they were investigating unauthorized access to commercial telecommunications infrastructure by people associated with China. The Post also reported that hackers were able to access unencrypted communications like text messages of the individual. Now, Reuters reported that on Friday that Chinese hackers also targeted phones used by people affiliated with the campaign of Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Well, that's all for today. For now, back to you guys. Hey, Marisha. Well, thank you so much for that comprehensive roundup, Jyotsna. Let's shift our focus now. Tech billionaire Elon Musk worked illegally in the United States long before he became one of Donald Trump's largest donors and campaign surrogates for the upcoming U.S. presidential polls.
Well, the Washington Post quoted former business associates' court records and company documents to state that Musk had not publicly disclosed of not having a legal right to work in the U.S. while building the company that became Zep2 later. The report also states that Musk never enrolled in his graduate study program at Stanford University after moving to Palo Alto in California in 1995. Instead, he reportedly devoted all his time to work on his startup.
Zip2 in 1999 sold out for about $300 million. It became a stepping stone for Tesla for Musk. Musk has emerged as a staunch supporter of Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump and donated $75 million to his political action committee to put Trump back in the White House. As per reports, the donation made Musk one of the largest spenders of the 2024 cycle.
The Tesla CEO, who now also owns X, formerly known as Twitter, is a South African-born entrepreneur. Since acquiring X for $44 billion in October 2022, Musk has always tried to monetize the social media platform extensively by live streaming video and audio calls.
Now, according to legal experts, leaving school it left Musk without a legal basis to remain in the United States because foreign students cannot drop out of school to build a company, even if they're not immediately getting paid, said Leon Fresco, a former Justice Department immigration litigator.
In 2020, Musk claimed he had a student work visa after deferring his studies at Stanford. I was legally there, but I was meant to be doing student work, he said in a 2020 podcast. Just last month, Musk called himself extremely pro-immigrant and added that whoever is allowed in the country should be talented, hardworking and ethical. Tensions are rising in Georgia after a controversial parliamentary election which took place over the weekend.
Now, Georgian President Salome Zurabishvili has declared that she does not recognize the results of the elections and has called for mass protests. The ruling Georgian Dream Party, it won the recently concluded polls with 54.8% of the votes.
Georgian president, along with the opposition leaders, urged the citizens to gather in the capital to demonstrate against what she labeled as a stealing of votes.
Now, she asserts that the election was tainted by Russian influence and that the results cannot be recognized. This assertion underscores the heightened political tensions in a nation caught between aspirations for closer ties with Europe and growing authoritarianism.
ვაღიარებ ამ არჩევნებს, ამ არჩევნების აღიარება არ შეიძლება, იმიტომ ეს არის იგივე რაც აღიარება რუსეთის აქ შემოსვლის, რუსეთის მიმართ საქართველოს დაქვემდებარების. მე ამისთვის არ ჩამოვსულ ამ ქვეყანაში, ამისთვის არ უცხოვრიათ ჩვენ წინაპრებს და ამას ჩვენ არ შევეგუებით ჩვენი შემდეგ თაობებისთვის. არ შეიძლება რომ ვინმე წაართვას საქართველოს თავისი ევროპული მომავალი.
The electoral campaign was marred by allegations of voter intimidation and fraud. Reports from various organizations, including the OSCE, highlighted instances of ballot stuffing and violence at the polling stations. The European Parliament has also expressed deep concerns over the democratic backsliding in Georgia, labeling the procedure as divisive.
Meanwhile, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is set to visit Georgia. The move has raised questions as Orban maintains close ties with the ruling Georgian Dream. After the declaration of the results, Orban celebrated Georgian Dream's victory, asserting that the people know what's best for their nation. And moving on, former Bolivian President Evo Morales has claimed that his life is in danger after gunshots were fired at his car.
The incident, which took place on Sunday, has intensified an already volatile landscape in Bolivia. The former president, who led the country from 2006 to until his resignation in 2019, shared the video of the attack on social media. Morales alleged that men dressed in black opened fire as his vehicle passed a military barrack, narrowly missing him. Morales' Movement for Socialism Party has condemned the attack, blaming the current government led by President Luis. The faction claimed that the attacker entered the military base before escaping.
Now, they've described the incident as a part of a broader trend of political violence in Bolivia, labeling the government as fascist. In response, President Arce has condemned all forms of political violence, promised a thorough investigation. However, tensions remain high, with Morales' supporters continuing to block key highways across the country, disrupting essential supplies of food and fuel.
14 disparos. Você podíamos verlo ahí.
And it's now time for a quick short break, but don't go anywhere. On the other side of World DNA, we'll get you a story from Japan, but the country's ruling coalition has fallen short of a majority mark. Voters punished the LDP for recent scandals, leaving no party with a clear mandate to lead the country.
Spanish President Pedro Sanchez arrived in India for a 3-day visit to India. This is the first such by a Spanish president in 18 years.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
a special business talk show where we bring forth the stories of business leaders.
From breakthrough technologies to visionary leadership, we will unlock the trends, the tactics, and dive into the minds of the industry's most influential leaders.
WION brings you this special series to uncover what drives them in a candid talk show, WION Business Masters.
The US race to power, marked by high-octane campaign rallies, life-threatening encounters, game-changing presidential debates, the color and the drama, the key defining moments, deep insights and informed analysis. Watch continuous coverage of the US presidential elections 2024 on WION World is One.
WION brings you a special business talk show where we bring forth the stories of business leaders.
From breakthrough technologies to visionary leadership, we will unlock the trends, the tactics, and dive into the minds of the industry's most influential leaders.
WION brings you this special series to uncover what drives them in a candid talk show, WION Business Masters.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
Vielleicht nur
Welcome back. You're watching World DNA with me, Raisha and Haim. There's lots lined up on the show, but first, a quick check on the headlines.
Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez arrives in India's Vadodara for talks with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Sanchez to inaugurate final assembly line plant of C-295 aircraft.
India and China expected to complete process of military disengagement across the line of actual control today, says reports. Non-hostile patrolling set to resume after both sides complete disengagement.
Egypt proposes an initial two-day truce in Gaza and limited hostage exchange aimed at securing a complete ceasefire. This is UN Security Council to hold an emergency meeting at Iran's request following Israel's missile strikes.
One person killed and more than 30 injured as truck rams into crowd near Mossad spy agency's headquarters in Tel Aviv. Police say truck driver shot by armed civilians at the scene.
Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's coalition fails to secure a majority in the lower house of the parliament, leaving no party with a clear mandate to lead the world's fourth largest economy.
In Uruguay's presidential elections, contestant of a left-wing bloc and the ruling centre-right coalition will face off in the runoff next month after topping the first round of elections as per predictions based on partial results.
China's large industrial firms see over a 27% decline in September, extending the decline in revenues as deflation takes toll. Reduced industrial earnings reflect the difficulties confronting China's $18 trillion economy.
Mohamed Salah scores a late equaliser for Liverpool as the Reds hold title rivals Arsenal to a 2-2 draw in the English Premier League. The stalemate puts the Reds 1 point behind leaders Manchester City. The makeup of Japan's future government was in flux after the ruling coalition fell short of a majority mark.
Japan's new Prime Minister Ishiba has called snap elections within days of taking office in October, but voters punished his Liberal Democratic Party for the recent scandals, leaving no party with a clear mandate to lead the world's fourth largest economy.
Well, according to the final tally, the LDP won 191 seats in the lower house of parliament, together with Koimeto, which is winning 24 seats. The coalition would hold between 215 seats, which is well short of the majority mark of 233 seats in the 465-seat parliament.
まだだって最終結果が出てませんからね、そんなことには言及はしませんが、ここに至るまでは相当に厳しいねと思いますし、それは選挙の途中というかな、半ばぐらいからこれは相当きついねということは実感はしてましたね。
The biggest winner of the night, the main opposition Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan, has won 148 seats, up from 98 previously, but also still well short of the 233 majority.
Well, in Japan's 2021 elections, the LDP won a majority on its own right with 259 seats in the lower house of parliament. Its alliance partner, Koimeto, had 32 seats back then.
The election was held at a time when the ruling party was slammed with allegations of several high-profile scandals. Voters have also been disgruntled with the ruling party over inflation and ties with China.
As mandated by the Constitution, the parties now have 30 days to figure out a grouping that can govern, and there remains uncertainty over how long Ishiba can survive after the drubbing. Smaller parties also made gains, and their role in negotiations could also prove extremely important.
The LDP has ruled Japan for almost all of its post-war history, and result marked its worst election since it briefly lost power in 2009 to a precursor of the CDP.
The uncertainty sent the yen currency to a 3-month low as investors and experts prepared for days or possibly weeks of political wrangling to form a government.
And Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has arrived in Vadodara, Gujarat for his 3-day visit to India.
This is the first such visit by the Spanish Prime Minister in a span of 18 years.
Now, during this visit, Sanchez will hold delegation-level talks with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and jointly inaugurate the Tata aircraft complex for manufacturing the C-295 aircrafts at the Tata Advanced Systems facility in Vadodara.
India formalized the acquisition of 56 Airbus C-295 aircraft in September 2021 to replace the aging legacy fleet of the Indian Air Force, under which 16 aircraft are to be delivered in flyaway condition from Spain, while the remaining 40 aircraft will be manufactured in India. Now, during his stay in Vadodara, Sanchez will also be visiting the iconic Darbar Hall of Lakshmi Vilas Palace, where both the leaders are set to have lunch. Well, built in the late 19th century of Maharaja Sayajirao Gaikwad, the palace is known to have hosted royal concerts and cultural events.
Now, Sanchez and Prime Minister Modi will also inaugurate the Bharat Mata Sarovar at Amreli and lay the foundation stone for various development projects worth over $500 million.
The Spanish Prime Minister will also go to Mumbai, where he will meet industry leaders, think tanks and Bollywood stars. He will also address the 4th India-Spain Forum organized by the Spain-India Council Foundation. But several MOUs are expected to be signed during the visit, as both countries look forward to deepen the bilateral partnership in various sectors like trade, infrastructure, defense and biotech, among others. Moving on, a major Vatican summit of global Catholic leaders ended with a call for women to be granted more leadership roles in the church.
But stopped short of calling for women to be ordained as clergy. The gathering that included cardinals, bishops and lay people from more than 110 countries also did not take a stand on the inclusion of LGBTQ+ community, despite discussions that it might call on the church to be more welcoming. Pope Francis called the month-long summit known as Synod of Bishops to consider the future of the worldwide church. It was the second of the two gatherings over a year and featured closed-door discussions among 368 members with voting rights, including nearly 60 women. Advocates for greater roles for women in the church had hoped that this might call for women to serve as deacons.
I think the final document will be received with much disappointment and frustration by many women around the world who are hoping for concrete changes. The document offers some very generous platitudes around women's equality and yet fails to provide concrete steps for how those might be implemented.
The text, 155 paragraphs, each required a two-thirds vote for approval. The paragraph on women deacons received the most number of votes, that is 258 against 97, but still passed.
Though the Father hasn't said women will be ordained deacon, he has not said women will not be ordained deacon. He has just said it remains open, it has to be studied. And if I understood correctly how that study group is functioning, it is first looking at what the women have done in history and can do in the church in sense of leadership, spiritual leadership, community leadership, and so on, without ordination.
Now, at the Synod's final document, that's a 52-page text approved by the Assembly late Saturday afternoon, also called for lay Catholics to be given greater voice in the selection of bishops and apologized several times for the, and I'm quoting here, untold and ongoing pains suffered by Catholics who were abused by clergy. Moving on then, India is looking inward for defence production with a tie-up with the Airbus plant in Gujarat.
The country is beefing up its defence manufacturing with its first private facility for military aircraft.
And India is looking at ramping up domestic defence production to reduce its need to import. The plant is a joint venture between Airbus and Tata Advanced Systems. The factory will manufacture transport planes to replace the aging fleet of the Indian military aircraft. During his two-day trip to India, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, along with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, will open the facility in Gujarat on Monday.
Well, a Bloomberg report quoting Indian officials showed that the delivery of the first aircraft is scheduled in 2026 and the remaining by August 2031. The manufacturing plant comes after Airbus and India signed a contract of 3 years. They signed the contract 3 years ago, for 56 C-2095 transports. The deal was for 219 billion rupees or $2.6 billion. State-owned companies including Bharat Electronics and Bharat Dynamics will also contribute to the initiative, with 16 of these aircraft being built in Spain and the remaining ones in India.
Now, India's decision to look inwards is an effort to lower its reliance on imports, particularly from Russia. An independent think tank claims that Moscow is still New Delhi's biggest supplier of weaponry, this despite a decline in recent years. India's defense readiness has been impacted by the delay in deliveries due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The war on the edge of Europe has also increased the need for domestically produced weaponry.
Well, German automakers are reporting a massive drop in their quarterly earnings. The reason being weak demand in the largest car market in the world.
China's slowing economy and price competitiveness are hurting the profits margins for luxury car makers, including Mercedes-Benz and BMW. Our next report looks at how Mercedes and other German automakers are navigating this downturn. Take a look.
German luxury automaker Mercedes-Benz has reported a significant earnings slump for the third quarter. Profits in its core car division dropped by 64% in the September quarter. The decline came as the Chinese market, the world's largest for luxury vehicles, saw reduced demand. Local consumers are cautious amid economic challenges and a lingering real estate crisis. Adjusted earnings before interest and taxes in the car unit dropped to $1.3 billion, significantly missing the analyst projection of $3.45 billion. This marks a challenging period for Mercedes as it navigates a complex global market. Mercedes-Benz and fellow German automaker BMW both faced a China sales decline last quarter. BMW experienced a 13% drop in total sales, and Mercedes was down by 3%. European automakers who derive substantial profits from the Chinese market are calling for regulatory reviews and respite from the tariff war between EU and China. These tariffs, intended to address subsidies on Chinese EVs, have added pressure on European brands, who already face competition from China's lower-cost EV models and challenging infrastructure hurdles at home. Business Bureau Report, WION for this one.
All right, on to developments now from the world of technology. OpenAI's transcription tool Whisper sparked concerns among developers and researchers over its tendency to produce hallucinations. In this context, hallucinations refer to incorrect or invented content within transcripts. While hallucinations are a known issue in generative AI, their presence in transcription has surprised experts. Reports reveal that Whisper's transcriptions can include inaccurate details such as racial commentary or fictitious medical information, raising potential risks for its use in sensitive environments like hospitals. An OpenAI spokesperson acknowledged the issue, stating that the company is actively working to enhance accuracy and reduce hallucinations.
Taiwan Semiconductors Manufacturing Company, also called TSMC, has stopped shipments to Chinese chip maker SoftGo. That is after a chip it made showed up in a Huawei AI processor. In 2020, the US expanded export rules to prevent foreign-made goods like TSMC's chips that uses US tech from reaching Huawei. SoftGo, however, says it follows all laws and has no business ties with Huawei. The U.S. Department of Commerce said it was aware of the reports but has not confirmed whether any investigation is ongoing or not. TSMC, which is the world's largest contract chip maker, in response said that it has not supplied Huawei since September 2020.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has raised alarm about rising cybercrime in the country, especially digital arrest scams. He has urged citizens to stay alert and safeguard themselves during his radio address. The Prime Minister explained that these scams target everyone. He additionally emphasized the importance of personal vigilance, as no legitimate investigative agency would initiate contact through calls or video chats to conduct such investigations. Prime Minister Modi also noted that the investigative agencies are actively coordinating with state authorities to tackle these scams. The Prime Minister has advised citizens to report such cases by dialing 1930 for the National Cyber Helpline or using its online portal.